If you had a premature baby in the early 1900s, the place to take them for the best medical care was a museum park. Hey y'all, I'm Christina, and you're listening to History and Hearsay. This episode has been on my list to do for quite some time, but recently I've started to get more requests to do this one, and I think it's mainly because of the conspiracy theories that are surrounding this entire case. So hang on to the very end of this episode, and I'm going to do a brief overview of the conspiracies. I will let you guys know what I think. Let's get into the story. So there's this chill little neighborhood in South Minneapolis. It's mostly tiny little bungalows and a few body shops. And then there's this one random old apartment building that really doesn't belong. Turns out this building used to be a part of an amusement park in the early 1900s called Wonderland. Sounds magical, but that's not the odd part. The odd part is the fact that this old building was the site of Wonderland's most popular attraction, which wasn't a roller coaster or even a fun house. This was the location of a sideshow called the Infantorium, which kind of sounds like the name of a creepy indie film. But in reality, it was an exhibit where people would pay 10 cents to stare at babies in boxes. Yes, actual living babies. Tiny, fragile, premature newborns who were struggling for their lives. They were all lined up in little incubators with glass windows like living museum displays. The wilder part was that this was how preemies got medical care back then. According to amusement park historian Lauren Rabinovitz, these babies exhibits were actually the go-to medical care for preemies at the time. Now, as crazy as that sounds, it's even crazier to think that this entire circus sideshow style of healthcare lasted for over 40 years. In the late 1800s, almost 1 in 5 babies in the United States died before childhood. And as bad as that sounds, it was actually an improvement from the previous decades. Now, back then, hospitals weren't yet the go-to place to give birth, as 19 out of every 20 births were still happening at home, which of course was no big deal as long as the baby was healthy. However, just like today, not every baby was born healthy, and many arrived prematurely, which honestly has nothing to do with hospitals because, as it turns out, babies really didn't have much of a chance even if they were born at a hospital. So I'm not really sure why I even wrote that because hospitals really had zero clue what to do with premature babies. Doctors were basically like, do your best to keep them warm. And parents had to get really creative. They would put babies in front of the fireplaces to sleep. They placed heated bricks in their cribs or stuffed the cribs full of feathers in an attempt to keep the babies warm. Some even rubbed their babies down with oil. But beyond that, all they could do was hope and pray for the best. The lack of specialized technology or training in regards to the care of premature babies meant that more than 3/4 of premature babies didn't survive. Now, at this time in America, the medical community seemed to kind of be like, meh, it is what it is. And no one really seemed to be working on solving this problem. However, doctors in France were thinking, hey, we really should try to do something about this. And they got a genius idea from the poultry industry. When they saw the way that chicken hatcheries worked, they saw how incubators were used to help hatch eggs, and they thought, what if we did this for human babies? Enter the human incubator, a warm box heated by a hot water tank underneath. So in the 1890s, a French inventor named Alexander Lion comes along and modernizes this entire thing. His version had hot water pipes underneath for steady heat, ventilation to keep the air fresh, and most importantly, a big old glass window so that people could actually see the babies inside. And when he debuted this fancy new incubator at the Berlin Industrial Exposition in 1986, it became an instant hit. Like, people were lining up to see these tiny babies chilling in their little warm boxes. He even gave it a name, Die Kinderbruttenstall, which meant child hatchery. So we can thank the poultry industry and a few out-of-the-box thinkers for the start of neonatal care. So there are these carnival showmen who see Dr. Lyon's incubators and they think, you know what? That looks like a great way to make some quick cash. So they purchase some knockoff incubators, probably like the Wish version of whatever Dr. Lyon was using, and they start their own premature baby sideshows. Because, I mean, why not? It's probably what they were thinking. But turns out keeping premature babies alive is actually really hard. Who knew? So most of these guys got out of the tiny baby exhibit game just as fast as they got into it. Thank goodness. However, there was one showman who was very into this whole idea, and he fortunately was not in it just for the money. Enter Dr. Martin Couney, the man, the myth, the baby-saving legend. I think he actually said Couney, which we're going to talk about in a minute, but everyone that has talked about him calls him Couney. So I may switch back and forth. I'm sorry. I'm going to try to stick with one way of pronouncing it, but I apologize. If I say Couney, I mean the same thing as Couney. So sorry, deal with it. In 1897, Couney set up his first incubator baby show in London, and unlike the other showmen, he actually seemed to care about keeping the babies alive rather than just collecting ticket sales, which I guess was a pretty wild concept. So he hired real nurses to take care of the babies, and the babies were fed actual breast milk. The ones who were too tiny and weak to suckle got their milk spoon-fed through the nose. Once a parent had turned their baby over to Dr. Couney's care, each baby went through the same very specific routine. Step 1, a nice lukewarm bath. Classic. Step 2, brandy. I guess maybe this made them sleepy. And then the third step was that they placed color-coded ribbons around their wrists. Pink for girls, blue for boys. And of course, this was so that visitors would know if they were looking at a little girl or a little boy. The babies would then be placed on display all day in their little incubators, except for 2 hours when they got to eat. Dr. Couney had super strict rules about cleanliness, and so naturally, his babies had a way better survival rate. Now, because the nurses would be handling these babies a lot, Couney had very strict rules for what the nurses could do even in their own personal life. So they were not allowed to eat burgers. I'm not really sure why, but they also were not allowed to smoke or drink alcohol. If one of these nurses was caught breaking these rules, even when they're off the clock, then they would be fired. So these cute little babies were put on display in these tiny little boxes with glass windows, all lined up in a row, and people paid the admission fee so they could walk through and just look at the sweet babies. Now, I've seen some stuff that says 10 cents, which I talked about earlier, and I've seen other stuff that says 25 cents. This went on for quite a while, so maybe the fee changed over time, but regardless, they got to walk through and watch the babies be fed, things like that. People really loved this. And seeing how popular this exhibit was, Couney thought, all right, let's take this show on the road. He picked up his tiny patients and set up shop at the Omaha World's Fair. And let me tell you, this was just the beginning. So real quick, if you don't know what the World's Fair was, let me break it down for you. It was basically the global event of the time. It was held in different countries over the years, and the whole idea was that they would show off the latest advancements in technology, culture, and industry, which was kind of just every country trying to be like, we're the smartest, we got the best inventors, just showing off and stuff like that. But these fairs were massive, like Super Bowl level events, except instead of a halftime show, you got groundbreaking tech. For example, Alexander Graham Bell debuted his brand new telephone at the 1876 fair in Philadelphia. And that same year, France also was like, hey, America, here's part of this Statue of Liberty that we're building for you guys. She's not done yet, but just you wait. Then there was the 1893 Chicago exhibition, which was basically Electricity the Musical. This was the first ever fair that was fully lit by electricity, and they were showing off all kinds of electrical powered stuff, like a moving sidewalk, electric sewing machines, and an electric chair, because humanity went from, oh, wow, we can light things up, to this could be used as a weapon in record time. Oh, and there was also where we got the Tesla versus Edison, because apparently these two guys had some type of petty rivalry going on with which type of electricity was better. Edison was over there like, hey guys, check out this light bulb, I can light it up. And Tesla was out there like floating objects with electricity. So yeah, I think we know who won that one. So all of that to say, the World's Fair was basically a super fancy science fair for grown-ups. But then at some point, the organizers started to think, you know what would really spice this up and draw even bigger crowds? circus acts. At the time, Coney Island as an amusement park destination was a pretty recent thing and was really starting to gain popularity, and fair organizers were like, let's do this. So they started adding rides like the brand new Ferris wheel and sideshow acts, which at first were mostly animal shows and circus type performances, but then things started to get kind of questionable real fast. And this is where we started seeing human oddities, or what they would call freak shows. People were lining up to see individuals with physical differences or an unusual talent. These exhibits featured everyone from people who were born without limbs to those who weighed 600 pounds, all the way to like contortionists who could fold themselves into a pretzel. And sometimes it was literally just someone who had above the average amount of body hair. Like, congratulations, sir. You have a very large, very long beard. So stand in this cage and we'll let people gawk at you. Now, quick side note, because I know our modern reaction to all of this is absolute horror. And obviously the idea of the freak show in general and profiting off of someone having like a disability is super gross. And while there's some questions about whether certain of these people were held against their will, like some of them were probably trafficked, some of them were literally kept in cages. I mean, this could be a whole deep dive in of itself. But there's another side to this in the fact that some of these performers were really grateful to be there. They were grateful for this opportunity for a job, because for a lot of people with disabilities, this was one of the only ways they could make money at a time when society wasn't just handing out accommodations. This is just one of the many reasons that history is not always black and white. There's so much nuance to things. We like to think in black and white, but it really isn't. One person that comes to mind is Joseph Merrick, aka the Elephant Man. This guy had a rare condition that caused large tumors to grow all over his body, and people were fascinated by him. There were all these wild stories about why he looked the way he did. Like, one of the rumors claimed that his mother was almost crushed by an elephant while she was pregnant, which sure sounds fake, but apparently this story is something his mother told, so it's believed to be real. Like, she tripped and fell and an elephant stepped right near her head, almost stepped on her, and this fright from this is believed to, obviously kind of superstitious, like this is believed to what has caused all his issues. But regardless, Joseph is one of the ones who went on record as having chosen to be a part of these shows because it was one of the only ways that he could make a living. And by all accounts, he was very grateful for this opportunity. I mean, what else was he gonna do? I always love his story because he has every reason to have been so bitter, but instead he had this incredibly positive outlook on life. He was known as being kind, intelligent, and a man of very strong Christian faith. If you want to know more about his story, you can look him up. It's heartbreaking, but his outlook on life is just really inspiring. So these freak shows were an absolute awful concept, obviously, but for some of these performers, it was their best or only option to be able to get money in order to eat. Just one of those things in history that makes you go, oh, yikes, but also it ended up helping some of these people. Okay, so Dr. Martin Couney's Babies Incubators fit right in with all of these other side acts, kind of as a freak show, but like a cute one instead of like a grotesque one. And it was extremely popular. But here's the thing. Aside from the fact that he was literally putting real life babies on display, there was something else kind of sketchy about him. Mainly the fact that this dude could not keep his story straight. Whenever he told people about his past, the details would shift. But the general vibe was that I'm from Europe, I got my medical training in France and Germany, I'm very fancy and smart. And at the time, both of those countries were decades ahead of the US in their medical education, and so all of this sounded pretty legit, except that when you dig into the official records, it doesn't really add up. Couney called himself Dr. Martin Couney for extra flair, but everyone else pronounced it Couney, so I'm not sure what the disconnect there is, but regardless, documents suggest that he was actually born Michael Cohn in Poland in 1869. Now, he claimed this was his first time to come to America, but records indicate that he had actually already been to the US in 1888, where he worked as a showman under the name of Martin Author. So technically, this was his round 2 in America, which can make you wonder why he would lie about something like that. Maybe just because he used a fake name last time, or was there something else? Now, also, Couney didn't invent the incubators as we talked about earlier, but he would occasionally imply that this was his own invention. He had also said that he earned his medical degree before the age of 18 and that he had been personally mentored by this fancy French physician. But records don't show him ever having gotten a medical degree. There's no proof that he ever studied in any of the cities that he claimed to study in. But again, in the time period we are now, we can research these things and no one's ever been able to prove that he was a doctor. So the general consensus now is that he was not a doctor. So the story he told the nurses that he hired is that he had gotten his medical degree in Europe, but it didn't transfer to the US. And so it was a pretty believable story. Honestly, I feel like there really isn't a reason why anyone would have questioned him back then because the stuff he was doing was working. The parents who were bringing their children to Martin Couney were very desperate. Most of them had been sent home by their doctors just to keep their baby warm and hope and pray. And some of them had actually been referred by their doctors to go see Martin Couney. He was thought of, again, as the only option. Like, imagine going to a hospital and the doctor's like, have you considered taking your baby to the carnival? But as crazy as it sounds, that's exactly what happened because Couney's incubators had shockingly good results. Couney is said to have perfected his act at the 1901 World's Fair in Buffalo, New York, which, fun fact, is also the same fair where President William McKinley was shot and then 8 days later died of gangrene because medical care was clearly not that great back then. But aside from that traumatic event, everyone had a great time at that year's World's Fair, and Couney set up right in the midway, which was the part of the fair where all of the carnival rides and sideshow acts were. And if there's one thing that this man knew how to do, it was advertising and marketing. He had all these huge, colorful signs with slogans like wonderful invention and infant incubators with living infants. He also had barkers outside yelling at the crowds to come and see the babies, and they were really hyping it up. Step right up. Maybe the future president is inside. Which, at this particular fair, knowing the whole thing with McKinley, it's kind of like, ooh, yikes. And like I said earlier, people loved it. They ate this up. These babies were so tiny, like really tiny. A lot of them barely weighed a pound. And so to sell the spectacle of how tiny they truly were, the nurses would dress them in doll clothes and even do this wedding ring trick where they would slip off their wedding band and put it over the baby's wrist just to show how tiny they truly were. Thousands of people paid the 10-cent or 25-cent admission to see the babies, and newspapers went wild for it. One reporter even claimed that Couney's baby exhibit was more exciting than Niagara Falls. And for a lot of people, it was true. Some got so invested in this that they would go back week after week to check on their favorite baby. Like, they were literally rooting for the one they wanted to survive. And again, the wildest part of all of this to a lot of people was the fact that Couney's method was actually working. Babies taken care of in this exhibit were 4 times more likely to survive than if they had just stayed with their parents. A local medical journal reported that out of the 52 babies delivered to Couney that summer, 48 survived, which, considering most premature babies back then had basically a 0 survival rate when they were this tiny, this was pretty unbelievable. Couney ran his exhibits under a few different names, sometimes calling it the Infantorium or Baby Incubators, and his slogan was, "All the world loves a baby." He even had nurses take the babies out and cuddle them in front of the audiences to really tug at those heartstrings. Now, this entire exhibit was ridiculously expensive. In 1903, the average cost for the care of one infant at Couney's facility was $15 a day, which would be about $405 in today's money. which honestly is still way cheaper than what we pay now. But back then, $15 a day was so expensive. The majority of people would not have been able to afford that. And so Couney never charged the parents of these babies. He didn't discriminate which babies he took. He took babies of all races and social classes. And they had so many people coming to see these babies that Couney was able to fully cover the cost of the care of these infants and also pay his nurses really good wages strictly off of the entrance fees, because that's how many people were really flooding in to see these exhibits. However, over time, the expense of moving the show every couple of weeks began to add up. Couney was basically building a fully functional NIC unit in every fairground that he went to, and then tearing it down and redoing it at the next place. And this added a whole other level of expense to it. So the big question was, if we're going to continue to do this, are we going to be able to sustain it financially? So now what? Well, the good news for Martin Couney and, the future of saving tiny babies, there was a new obsession sweeping America, and that was amusement parks. Before this, fairs were kind of a one and done situation where they would, set up for a few weeks and then pack up and leave. But amusement parks were permanent. They took all the best parts of the fair midways, the rides, the side shows, all the yummy fried foods and snacks, and made them a full-time summer gig. By 1910, every U.S. city with a population of at least 20,000 people had its own amusement park. And these places were pulling in a quarter of the city's population every weekend. And these amusement parks were kind of a sneaky way to get people used to new technology. Like, electricity was still freaking people out back then. I wonder why, because they tried to sell like how amazing and wonderful it was and also how it could kill at the same time. So, those were conflicting messages. People were terrified of electric trains and motors, knowing that electricity could kill, but you put people on a thrill ride or dazzle them with a fireworks show, and suddenly technology felt fun and exciting instead of life-threatening. And again, as we mentioned earlier, Couney's incubator babies were the perfect fit for this vibe. Couney's Buffalo exhibit had caught the eyes of two businessmen who were planning to open a new amusement park in Coney Island. Now, Coney Island already had two parks, but this new one was going to be called Luna Park, and it was going to be bigger, better, and electric. Like, it was going to have over 250,000 electric lights, and its flagship attraction was called A Trip to the Moon. The Wright brothers had barely gotten off the ground in 1903, and these guys were like, let's go full sci-fi. They were reaching for the stars. And right in the center of all of these rides, games, and attractions was Couney's futuristic Infantorium. So in the spring of 1905, Couney took the show on the road, or maybe we should say off the road, because he set up new permanent exhibits in Chicago, Denver, and Minneapolis. And guess what? It worked. Instead of burning money by tearing down and rebuilding his operation every time a fair ended, he finally had multiple locations that stayed put, which of course meant repeat customers, because like I mentioned earlier, people really loved coming back week over week to see the baby that they were rooting for get stronger and bigger and healthier and all of those things. And of course, this gave people a longer period of time to be able to do that. These stationary exhibits made Couney a very wealthy man. He bought a gorgeous house on Coney Island, became known for throwing extravagant dinner parties, and was honestly just thriving. But despite all of this, it was very clear that this was not just about the money for Couney. Yes, these new exhibits had made him very rich, but according to literally everyone who knew him during his lifetime, saving babies truly was not just a business for Couney. It was actually his life mission. He liked to say that he was creating propaganda for preemies, with the ultimate goal of getting his incubators into hospitals. He figured that if he could prove they work, the U.S. medical community would finally get on board. Spoiler alert, it wasn't going to be that easy. Couney tried everything. He wined and dined doctors, he gave them demonstrations, and during the time whenever he was traveling with these fairs, he had tried donating his incubators to local health departments when each fair ended, but no one ever took him up on that. they were not interested in these incubators even for free. So you might be wondering, why? Why in the world were these doctors not willing to even just give this a chance? So their actual excuses were all over the place, but many people brought up the fact that the amusement parks were basically fire hazards with roller coasters, like not safe. Case in point, in 1911, a Coney Island park with one of Cooney's exhibits inside just straight up caught fire. Now, luckily, all of the babies were saved by the doctors and nurses on staff. Still, the whole thing had people side-eyeing these parks even harder, and honestly, fair enough, because Coney Island parks were burning down a lot. One park burned in 1907, then again in 1936, and again in 1939. And Luna Park went up in flames in 1944. So not exactly the safest spot for fragile newborns. And of course, the media was also making it worse because one newspaper straight up reported that all of the babies had died in one of these fires, which was not true. Every baby was fine, but the damage was already done, and people were kind of already starting to feel a little weird about the whole tiny premature babies at the amusement park attractions thing, which is kind of good to hear people were starting to question the ethics of it. But Cooney continued to defend his sideshow, claiming his exhibits were the last resort for mini preemies. And in fact, his survival rate was much higher than any other option, or including hospitals, as we mentioned earlier. So while some doctors took the whole "it isn't safe" angle, that really does not make any sense at all, because Cooney was trying to get his incubators into hospitals, which would have immediately made it safer. So again, lots of different excuses given. Many of them didn't make sense, but many historians have pinned down one big, very ugly reason for why they think that the doctors were against it, and that was eugenics. In 1901, an anonymous editorial made the rounds in medical journals, basically dragging Cooney's incubators, and their argument was that saving weak babies was bad for the human race. This author, who of course did not give their name, claimed that babies like Cooney's would, quote, transmit their deficiencies, deformities, and vices to the next generation. Because apparently in their mind, if a baby was born early and couldn't survive without help, maybe they shouldn't survive. This loser definitely should have given their name. If you're gonna say it, own it. Am I right? Worse than the fact that someone believed this is that they weren't alone. The eugenics movement was huge in the 1900s. Some of the same fairs where Cooney was saving premature babies also had eugenics exhibits, straight up promoting the idea that only the strong or the best should survive. So Cooney was out there honestly saving lives while the medical establishment was like, let's not. So 35 years go by of Cooney doing these exhibits, and hospitals are still slacking. By this time, it's the 1930s, and if you had a preemie, your best bet was still to take them down to the Midway and place them in a literal amusement park attraction. But luckily, this is the time when things finally started to change. Right in the middle of the Great Depression, Dr. Julius Hess, who was a legit respected Chicago doctor, started becoming familiar with Cooney's work. He saw one of his setups and he was like, wait, this actually works. Unlike the rest of the medical community, he wasn't too busy turning his nose up at Cooney's sideshow to realize that, babies were surviving because of it. So Hess started studying Cooney's methods with the idea of bringing them into the respectable world of medicine. Now, Dr. Hess had actually tried to start a hospital wing for infants back in the 1920s, but it had flopped due to a lack of funding. It turns out that hospitals weren't actually prioritizing premature babies. I know, shocking, like that's the whole theme of the story. But Dr. Hess also knew that if he were to just go out and team up with an amusement park doctor, people weren't going to take him seriously. And so he had to go about this carefully. And so instead of just copying Cooney's incubators, Hess decided to design his own. So both of these men needed something. Dr. Hess needed publicity to get money to fund taking care of babies, and Cooney needed respectability. So they teamed up, and when the Chicago hosted the World's Fair in 1933, Cooney's incubator exhibit had the official support of Dr. Hess. And suddenly, this was no longer just a carnival attraction. It was a medically approved, life-saving exhibit. Even Chicago's health commissioner signed off on it. Then in the second summer of the fair, they threw a baby reunion, like for publicity, where 41 moms walked down the midway holding their healthy 1-year-old babies who had all been saved by incubators in Dr. Couney's exhibit the year before. Absolute PR gold. After that, Chicago became the first U.S. city to create a public health policy specifically for premature infants. Dr. Hess became the father of American neonatology, and finally, other cities started putting incubators in actual hospitals. In 1943, a New York hospital opened the city's first department for premature infants. Couney told his family that his job was done and he closed up shop. The sideshow era of neonatal care was over. Beth Allen was born in Brooklyn in 1941. Super premature. She was only 1.5 pounds. Her twin sadly didn't survive, and her mother was not about to hand her baby over to some carnival sideshow. Absolutely not. Quit making the suggestion. That's ridiculous. That's crazy.
She was totally against it. When the doctor said that she had to let me go to Dr. Couney, she was, no, I'm not. My baby is not a freak. She's not going to a sideshow. No way.
But when your only other option is basically take your baby home to die, you start to reconsider real quick. So, desperate to save Beth's life, her mother finally caved and took her to Couney's incubator exhibit, and thanks to Couney's care, Beth survived. Her parents were so grateful that they actually took her to visit him every single year.
My parents took me to visit him every Father's Day until he passed away because that's how they felt about him.
And of course, Beth was not some one-off miracle. She was one of over 6,500 babies that Couney's sideshow had saved over his 45-year run as a carnival baby doctor. Couney is usually remembered by his Coney Island facility, but as we've talked about here, he ran multiple other clinics for 38 years, and his facilities were all remembered for being super clean and professional. And this was thanks in part to one of his nurses, Annabelle May, who later would become his wife. She was very serious about hygiene and strict medical procedures, which most certainly played a huge role in why this entire operation was so successful. Couney and his wife Annabelle ended up having a premature daughter of their own who survived with the help of one of his incubators and eventually grew up to work in his business as well. Once his sideshow career had ended, Couney received some financial support from sympathetic doctors like Dr. Julius Hess. It turns out that the last several years he was in business, Couney had ended up sinking all of his life savings into keeping the business going, and only 7 years after closing up shop, he died penniless. So again, no one can accuse this guy of having been in this only for the money. Now, this topic, like I said earlier, has been on my list, and I've recently started to get requests to cover it, mainly because of all of the conspiracy theories. And listen, I love a good conspiracy theory. So naturally, I went really deep down the rabbit hole in this one, like way too deep. And this is honestly really truly only going to be a quick rundown of some of the theories because otherwise this video would be like 5 hours long. But one of the biggest theories ties into the orphan train movement, which if you don't know about that, I did an entire episode on that, so you guys can check that out. But a very simplified version of what it was is back in the mid-19th century, there were a ton of immigrants who were coming to the United States, and they were flooding and overcrowding places like New York City. The crazy overcrowding was leading to diseases being everywhere and spreading rapidly, and people were dying left and right, and tons of kids were just left without parents. Some of them were abandoned by their families because they couldn't afford to feed them, and so to help these kids, they were put on trains and shipped out to the Midwest. As the country was expanding, there were all of these farms that needed workers. And technically, this was supposed to be to help these kids find loving homes. But in reality, while some were adopted into actual families and were lovingly raised, many of them were really only used as indentured servants. A lot of them were physically and sexually abused, and a lot of horrible things happened to them. But estimates say that there were at least 200,000 to 500,000 kids who were sent out across the country in this way. But here's where the conspiracy theory comes in. Some people believe that a lot of these kids weren't just orphaned immigrant kids. They believe they were trafficked to this country, like deliberately sit here as children without their parents for some unknown reason. And what's even weirder is that this all happened right around the same time that Couney was showcasing premature babies at the World's Fair. And so naturally, people started wondering, were these incubator babies just being shuffled from his incubators to the orphan trains after their time in the exhibit? Like, was this how they were getting so many babies onto the trains? Which, first of all, I'm going to say there were hundreds of thousands of children on these trains, and the number of children he saw was believed to be around 8,000, with at least 6,500, maybe more, surviving. So it seems to be that the amount of children who went through his exhibits and all of his career was only around like less than 10,000. So to me, it's like, okay, that's not enough kids to really, I mean, who knows, right? One of the other theories suggests that if there were already too many kids at this point that were being sent on the train, then why was someone trying to save premature babies? But to me, that's also very thin because, I mean, hello, every life has value. Maybe that's why. This theory kind of spirals hard into other ideas like test tube babies and human cloning. Now, there's a lot of this that comes from a super weird video from back in the day, which if you're watching on YouTube, I'm showing you guys, but it's called the over-incubated baby. And in this video, a guy claims you can make a baby grow a year's worth in 1 hour. And people were like, why? Like, why would you need to do this? And I'm very logical. I'm like, okay, it's a magic show. Like, is it half the magic just doing weird stuff to mess with people? So why not? Like, why would you not want to do this? But to the conspiracy theorist, this looks really strange. Like, maybe there's a connection here. There are even some conspiracies that tie back into the fact that there were a lot of insane asylums during this time. And some of the theories claim that during this time, a lot of the people who were locked away were not because they were mentally ill, but because they were parents of these missing kids, or they were just people who wouldn't go along with the plan. What plan? So the next part of this is, have you guys ever seen those creepy vintage postcards of babies being born in Cabbage Patches? If you have, then you probably already know where I'm going with this, but the theory is that those weren't cute artistic choices. Nope. People think this was a clue, a secret message about cloning. Now, I have had several requests to talk about the Cabbage Patch babies specifically in regards to cloning several different times over the last couple of years. And I did dig into this a couple of years ago, but I don't know, you guys. I'm just not buying it. There's another video with this. It's called the Cabbage Patch Fairy, and people were commenting about how she was way too rough with the babies in the film. They were speculating that maybe these weren't real human babies. But again, I mean, have you guys ever seen how rough NICU nurses are with premature babies? I just don't see this as the smoking gun that people think it is. And so to wrap this all up nicely in a bow, if I'm understanding this correctly, all of these theories tie back to a much bigger theory about an ancient civilization called Tartar. I'm probably saying that wrong, or Tartaria. I think that might be it. According to some people, Tartaria was this huge global empire that was wiped off the face of the earth for some unknown reason. Now, this is based on a real ancient civilization, and I think it was Central Asia, so there's some ties to reality here, but a lot of it's just speculation and like theories that people have made up or concluded based on their research. But okay, so this civilization's wiped out the face of the earth, and they, whoever they are, have been secretly trying to repopulate the earth. And so what do incubator babies, orphan trains, cloning, and creepy cabbage art have in common? Apparently everything. Again, I love sometimes just going down the rabbit hole of a good conspiracy and seeing if I can be convinced. But after doing so much research on this, I really just want my time back, because I gotta be real with you guys. I couldn't find any shred of anything that convinced me. Now, I will tell you guys, I know there's a lot of trafficking going on in the world today. So I'm very open to the fact that a lot of that stuff has probably been going on for all of history. And, there's a lot of things we think are wholesome. There was really dark things behind the closet. Like, I'm on board with you guys with all of that. Like, there is a lot of things going on that the average everyday person doesn't realize. If you're living like, a life of being a good citizen and blah, 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 whatever, you're not in these dark underworlds, right? So there's a lot going on that we are not aware of. We'd be horrified to find out. Like, I totally get that. But I just couldn't find anything to grasp onto that felt like reality, like any of these pieces of evidence really just are super easy to explain away, way too easy to explain away. I'm also aware that people have been working on cloning for decades and decades, and I have no doubt that we probably will eventually be able to grow organs and things like that, which would be amazing if we could, have that for organ transplants. But I personally think my biggest issue with cloning is that I believe that our souls or spirits is the breath of life that comes directly from God. So I don't think that people are ever going to be able to replicate the breath of life. If we create some kind of clone, they're going to be like a dumb zombie or a robotic, or I don't know. You guys let me know what you think. That part always hangs me up. Do I believe we can one day, again, create like an organ or something? Yeah, like that would not surprise me at all. If they came out tomorrow and were like, hey, we can create an artificial heart, I'd be like, yeah, I could see it, or even an artificial womb. I know they're working on all that kind of creepy stuff. But anyway, that being said, if you have a solid source that actually convinced you that any of these theories are real, or if you have a different theory that you want to throw into the mix, let me know in the comments down below, and I'll definitely check them out because again, I wasted way too much time trying to find one solid piece of something that was firm to hold on to, and I just couldn't do it. There was nothing that convinced me. There was nothing that even made me go, that's an interesting thought. As horrible as it sounds, I would definitely see, I could see the human trafficking element here, but the rest of it, there's nothing tangible I can hang on to. So now, regardless of whether you see Martin Couney as a fraud, in some ways it does appear that he was. He fought so hard to get incubators into hospitals, and he was directly responsible for saving the lives of more than 6,500 babies, as I said earlier, and indirectly responsible for saving countless more babies, even long after he was gone. So credentials or not, he definitely left quite a legacy. In the next episode, I'm going to be covering the time that Canada literally built a zoo for children. Not even joking. You guys don't want to miss it. So see you right here next week. Couney? She took her to Couney. I think I've been calling this guy Couney this whole time. Have I been calling him Couney like Coney Island? Oh gosh. Why can I not talk? I'm like, I'm going to have a podcast. I can't talk. That sounds like a great plan.